They say the desert had already won, that Burkina Faso, once called the land of honest men, would die not by war, but by thirst. The rivers had vanished, the wells were poisoned, even the sky seemed to forget how to rain. But then, something impossible happened. The same water that cities threw away filthy, forgotten toxic came back, pure. And the world's poorest farmers watched as clean water flowed again through fields that had been dead for a generation. Some fell to their knees, others wept. For them it wasn't just water, it was resurrection. Behind that miracle stood one man, President Ibrahim Traoré, and one idea that defied global logic. Not a single drop wasted, because our people are not waste. This is not charity, this is not aid. This is the moment Africa proved that hope can be engineered. If you believe that freedom begins when nations learn to build for themselves, stay until the end. Because in Burkina Faso, even Wastewater has learned to fight back. In March 2024, while most of the world debated sanctions, elections, and the price of oil, something far more transformative began in the dusty heart of West Africa. President Ibrahim Traoré, the young captain who had already shaken the old political order, turned his gaze toward the ground beneath his feet, toward the dying soil of Burkina Faso. He gathered his ministers, engineers, and military planners and issued a command that sounded almost poetic. We will not beg for water, we will create it. Thus began Project Water Rebirth 2025, a plan so ambitious that foreign observers called it delusional. Its goal: recycle every drop of the capital's wastewater and turn it into the clean irrigation that would feed the nation. 12 biofiltration plants would rise around Ouagadougou, each one built by local hands, soldiers, students, and volunteers. No foreign contractors, no imported machinery. By August 2024, the first station in Koudougou opened. Each day it processed 20,000 cubic meters of wastewater, enough to irrigate 4,000 hectares of parched farmland. The secret lay in native bacteria cultivated by local scientists, a natural filtration method that required neither chemicals nor foreign patents. At first, the world mocked the idea. Western experts labeled it a desperate African experiment. But when satellite images began to show faint streaks of green reappearing across the outskirts of the capital, ridicule turned into disbelief. Within months, the fields once abandoned by despair began to shimmer again. Crops sprouted where there had been dust. Families returned from migration camps. For the first time in years, Burkina Faso exported onions instead of importing them. People called it the second independence, a quiet revolution of water and will. But this was only the beginning, because when the first clean stream reached the villages beyond the capital, what happened next would move an entire continent to tears. April 12, 2025, a date that would forever be remembered as the day the earth wept. The village of Bulmiougou, once little more than cracked dust and hollow wells, stood still beneath the burning sun. For 10 years, there had been no water here, only waiting, praying, and leaving. Families had scattered. The soil had forgotten how to live. Even the birds had flown away. But that morning, hundreds of villagers gathered near a concrete canal built by local soldiers and volunteers. The air was heavy with disbelief and hope. A boy climbed onto a fence and shouted, "They said the water will come today." And then it did. At first it was a trickle, then a steady rush like a heartbeat returning after a long silence. The sound of flowing water filled the valley, echoing against the reed hills. People gasped, some laughed. And then, as if the entire village shared one breath, they cried. Elderly farmers fell to their knees, their hands trembling in the water. Mothers filled their clay pots and poured the first buckets onto the dead earth. The smell of soil awakening filled the air. One old man whispered, "We used to bury our crops, now we bury our thirst." Journalists from across the continent captured the moment, a raw, unfiltered resurrection. The images of tears and laughter spread across Africa, within hours tagged Water Rebirth and Traore Miracle. In Ouagadougou, crowds gathered around television screens, watching their people touch life again. By the end of that week, the Ministry of Agriculture reported over 70% of the capital's wastewater successfully recycled, producing 420 million liters of irrigation water every month and reviving 300,000 hectares of farmland. For the farmers of Burkina Faso, it wasn't about science anymore, it was about salvation. They called the returning streams the blood of the nation. When President Ibrahim Traoré visited Bulmyougou days later, he didn't wear his uniform. He walked barefoot into the wet soil, bent down, and scooped a handful of water. Then, with a quiet smile, he said, "You see this mud? It used to be our shame. Now it is our pride." That moment was broadcast across the continent. And while the people celebrated, something else began to stir: curiosity, skepticism, and fear among those who once controlled Africa's dependence. Because if Burkina Faso could turn waste into water, what else could it turn into freedom? June 2025. Ouagadougou's Revolution Square was filled beyond imagination. Over 200,000 people, farmers, students, soldiers, mothers, stood shoulder to shoulder beneath the blazing sun. Their faces glistened not just with heat, but with pride. When President Ibrahim Traoré walked onto the stage, silence spread through the crowd like a wave. He raised a cup of clear water drawn from the new purification plant and spoke only one sentence: "No drop wasted, because our people are not waste." The square erupted. People shouted, sang, and waved flags soaked in sweat and tears. For the first time in living memory, an African leader didn't ask the world for help. He told his people they already had the power to save themselves. Within days, the speech went viral across the continent. Youth movements in Ghana, Kenya, and Senegal began posting the quote under the hashtag Traore Doctrine. The United Nations Environment Programme recognized Burkina Faso as a green innovation pioneer. But the celebration didn't please everyone. Western headlines carried a colder tone. A risky African experiment. Concerns over untested wastewater treatment in Burkina Faso. Editorials warned that populist environmentalism could end in contamination. Yet the facts said otherwise. The nation's new biofiltration system met World Health Organization standards with purification levels of 98.4%, rivaling even California's facilities. In Paris and Brussels, boardrooms of multinational water corporations held emergency meetings. Their contracts across the Sahel, once secured through aid dependency, were now at risk. A few executives called Traoré's project economic sabotage. But in the villages, no one cared. Crops were growing again. Children bathed in clean water for the first time in years. Hope, once rationed like food, was now overflowing. As foreign analysts questioned its sustainability, Ibrahim Traoré appeared on national TV with quiet defiance. "Our water is cleaner than their politics." The statement lit up African social media like wildfire. For millions of Africans, that sentence captured the truth they had felt for decades: that poverty wasn't natural, it was engineered. And now so was their liberation. Across the continent, universities began studying the Burkina model. Delegations from Mali, Niger, and Sudan arrived to learn. In a matter of months, a small landlocked nation had changed the conversation from survival to sovereignty. But with global attention came new pressure. International consultants demanded oversight. Western agencies offered safety grants in exchange for data access. Behind closed doors, the tension grew. Burkina Faso had not only created water, it had created independence. And for the old powers of the world, that was far more dangerous. By September 2025, the story of Burkina Faso's water revolution had traveled across oceans. It landed in American homes through the PBS documentary, The Water Rebirth, How One African Nation Defied Drought. The opening image was unforgettable: an old farmer kneeling in a flooded field, tears running into the soil. The narrator's voice carried a quiet awe. In one of the poorest nations on earth, waste has become the source of life. Within hours, American social media buzzed with reactions. Thousands of viewers, especially older Americans, wrote to PBS comparing the story to the Dust Bowl era of the 1930s. One retired engineer from Kansas wrote, "It reminds me of the America I grew up believing in, when we built things, when we solved problems ourselves." Across rural towns, churches and civic groups began using the documentary as a case study in faith and innovation. For many, Ibrahim Traoré symbolized something they felt had been lost courage without cynicism. At Stanford, MIT, and the University of Texas, environmental scientists dissected the data. What they found stunned them. Burkina Faso's system treated wastewater for less than 1/9 the cost of California's most efficient plants, while maintaining 99% bacterial purity. PBS followed up with an interview featuring Dr. Martha Klein, an American hydrologist, who said, "They achieved in 1 year what some developed nations haven't done in a decade: sustainability through simplicity." In Washington, policymakers began to pay attention. The State Department's Office for Environmental Partnerships proposed a new initiative, the Water Bridge Program, designed to share research with nations leading in low-cost filtration. For the first time, Burkina Faso's name appeared on the same list as Singapore and Israel. But Ibrahim Traoré was cautious. He had seen how partnerships often meant control. When a US delegation arrived to propose joint development, he received them warmly but firmly. Standing in front of cameras, he said, "We do not ask for help. We ask for partnership, equal or nothing." That clip went viral in America. Independent media hosts replayed it millions of times. A conservative commentator remarked, "This young African leader just said what most of our own politicians are too afraid to say." The phrase "equal or nothing" became a rallying cry across online communities that admired resilience and self-reliance. Behind the scenes, US defense analysts took note as well. The Pentagon's Environmental Resilience Division requested a technical briefing on Burkina Faso's modular biofiltration systems. The question was simple but profound. How did a small landlocked country achieve water security with no external aid? For the first time, Burkina Faso wasn't seen as a charity case, it was seen as a model. And as American farmers in drought-stricken states like Arizona and New Mexico watched those streams flowing through African soil, they began asking the unthinkable: if they can do it there, why can't we? In less than a year, the nation once dismissed as forgotten had forced the most powerful country in the world to look inward. But Traoré was already moving to the next stage, one that would transform a local triumph into a continental revolution. November 2025. As foreign analysts continued to debate whether Burkina Faso's miracle was a stroke of luck or a short-lived experiment, Ibrahim Traoré unveiled his next move, one that would turn the nation's triumph into a doctrine. Standing before parliament, he announced, "Our water is not just for us, it is for Africa." The words electrified the room. Ministers rose to their feet in applause. Outside crowds gathered in the capital to watch the broadcast on giant screens. That morning, Traoré launched Aqua Faso, the second phase of Water Rebirth 2025. The plan was audacious: export Burkina Faso's biofiltration technology to Mali, Niger, and Chad, nations once crippled by drought and dependency. But Traoré didn't want to sell the technology. He wanted to share it. Through military engineers and university researchers, Burkina Faso offered free training and blueprints under an agreement called the Sahel Water Pact. The initiative symbolized a new kind of diplomacy, one built not on charity but on solidarity. Western media was stunned. How could the smallest, poorest country in the region suddenly lead an environmental renaissance? Traoré's answer was calm. "Our ancestors gave the world gold. We give the world life." That line traveled across borders within hours. On social networks, millions repeated it under the tag Aqua Faso. Burkina Faso, once synonymous with drought, was now exporting life itself. By early December 2025, the African Union voted unanimously to adopt parts of Burkina Faso's model into its continental development framework, calling it the water doctrine of Traore. For the first time, African nations looked not to Brussels or Washington for environmental solutions, but to Ouagadougou. Traore's engineers traveled across the Sahel to train hundreds of specialists. Within weeks, the first joint filtration hub opened in Niamey, financed not by the IMF, but by 3 African treasuries working together. Western commentators struggled to understand the shift. The Financial Herald wrote, "This is not about water anymore, it's about sovereignty." In Washington, think tank reports described the phenomenon as the rise of pragmatic African nationalism. Meanwhile, French corporations that had dominated water contracts for decades scrambled to renegotiate. But Traoré refused dependency disguised as partnership. "We will cooperate with anyone who respects our sovereignty," he told the press, "but we will never trade freedom for funding." His words resonated beyond Africa. Across Latin America and Asia, reformists cited the water doctrine as proof that independence could be engineered. By year's end, 2,000 foreign engineers had trained under Aquafaso, and satellite imagery from NASA showed expanding greenbelts around Ouagadougou, a visible halo of renewal. Burkina Faso had not only purified its water, it had purified its image, transforming from a forgotten desert into a symbol of self-reliance. And as 2025 drew to a close, one truth became undeniable. The revolution of Ibrahim Traoré had moved from the soil to the soul, and it was still spreading. The sun sets over Ouagadougou. In the golden light, water glitters between rows of new crops. Children chase dragonflies over the fields. Old farmers sit silently beside the canals, watching reflections of a sky they once feared had abandoned them. Burkina Faso is no longer begging for rain. It has learned to create it. President Ibrahim Traoré walks among his people not as a ruler, but as a witness to their rebirth. His voice carries softly over the water. "We did not ask permission to be free. We stood up and claimed it." That line echoes far beyond Africa, because this story of a nation that turned its waste into life is not just about water. It's about dignity, faith, and the courage to build when no one believes you can. If the spirit of Ibrahim Traoré touches your heart, share this story. Subscribe to keep the flame of a free Africa alive. And remember, in Burkina Faso, not a single drop is wasted, because neither are its people.